even conceive of what this is. It's stranger than we can suppose. And so the cultural fury that characterizes the 20th century, the tremendous upheaval and obliterating of traditional culture, the tremendous movement of information electronically around the globe, the revolutions in physics and archaeology and linguistics, all of these things are acting to complexify our world to the point where it finally, I think, must be dawning on everyone that we are moving into a completely different kind of ontos of the relationship between man and nature. When one examines the I Ching, the King Wen sequence, what is immediately apparent after only a few minutes of inspection is that it is not simply 64 hexagrams in some random association, but rather that the hexagrams occur in pairs. The second term of each pair is the inversion of the previous hexagram. And there are 8 cases where the natural structure of the hexagram makes its inversion ineffective in changing any of the lines. In other words, there are 8 cases where inverting a hexagram effects no change. The pairs of hexagrams that are then placed into opposing positions vis-a-vis each other add to 64. So what I believe is happening here is we are uncovering the secrets of a pre-Han occult school of numerological speculation. Now, an obvious question would be, why should the study of a 4,000-year-old Chinese divinatory system yield an insight into the structure of felt experience in the here and now? The reason, I believe, is that this pre-Zhou Chinese psychology that was being practiced was in fact immensely sophisticated even by modern standards, and that using techniques which would anticipate the later development of yoga in India, perhaps using psychotropic substances, these early Chinese Taoist shamans were penetrating to the very organizational foundation of matter itself. What this is essentially an energy structure drawn out of a mathematical analysis of the King Wen sequence. Here is the fractal pattern that is typical of the entire wave. It happens to show up at certain levels. And the notion is that throughout the wave, when it is moving downward, novelty, density of connection is increasing. So the general conclusion from these screens is that novelty is being increased and conserved as we move through time. Now, for instance, in this screen, which is further closure with today, we see 562 million years, virtually the entire career of higher life forms on the planet. 8,500 years on the screen. The great Proto-Egyptian civilizations, Sumer, Chaldea, are strung out like pearls along this plunge. Egypt culminates that ancient hierarchical form of dominator society. Mycenaean pirates plunder Minoan Crete at this point. Here we have the Periclean age in Athens. Here we have the Augustinian age in Rome. Down here we have the Roman collapse, and then the oscillating around a mean in a high novelty domain that has characterized time since the fall of the Roman Empire. The Dark Ages is here. The 10th century Islam is here. The Black Death the discovery of America, the European Enlightenment, World War II. Adolf Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany. The atom bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. The summer of love is up here. Then the Reagan era stretches down through here, and the moment that we're currently living through is right down in here. This is a span of time from 1991 to 1997. So upon the basis of this screen, we can make a series of predictions of a sort about what will go on in the 1990s. And what it's showing us is that there is a punctated, slightly recidivist movement coming across here through 92, an American election late in 92. Then this span of time here, in contrast to the domains around it, looks like a fairly conservative period, which ends spectacularly in May of 96 or so, when something happens which propels the entire wave into a deeper level of novelty than it has ever displayed before. What I'm going to show you here is the final terminus of the wave in 2012. Now remember, this is the same wave we've been looking at in all our discussion before, but finally the wave not only descends deep into novelty, it descends into the maximum possible depth of novelty, which is signified by the horizontal scale of the graph. In other words, and then it ceases. The wave is damped. If you think of the wave as an oscillation, well then this is its fixed point, and presumably its other fixed point is the birth of the universe. It's like a navigational device for a time machine that has yet to be built. When time machines are built, they will have to have something like this set in the dashboard to navigate through time, because time has many scales and many densities. So I'm confident that what we're doing here, creating models for new technologies that allow the human mind, if not eventually the human body, to explore higher dimensional space, not as an abstraction, but as the fabric of their own lives and the life of the culture and cultures in which we are all embedded. Now, one thing we haven't talked about that's probably worth talking about is somebody pointed out that the pattern recurs. That lays the basis for a theory of resonance. So that, for instance, here I'll stop this so we can talk about it. If you have a perfect memory, you may recall that many screens ago we looked at a pattern like this, and I said Çatalhöyük was here, and Chaldea, Sumer, and Egypt were arranged along here. Well, this is the lower resonance of that. The idea being then that historical periods are in fact shaped by the historical period that they are in resonance with by this theory. So, for example, remember how I said the pyramids were built right down here, or the Great Pyramid at Giza? Well, if we look on this resonance, what we discover right down there is the rise of Nazi Germany. Now, saying that Nazi Germany is a resonance of pharaonic Egypt may at first seem counterintuitive until you start thinking about it, and then here's what you come up against.
Egypt invented the idea of the god-king leader. The word pharaoh and the word Führer are thought by some people to have a common etymological root. The Egyptians also were the first people to really commit themselves to state-supported massive projects in the domain of tasteless architecture. This was something the Nazis were hugely into. Both used slave labor to build their massive and tasteless architectural constructions, and amazingly enough, both leaned heavily on the Jews for this labor. And yet, separated by thousands of years, operating in different parts of the earth, but curiously connected by this wave generated out of the I Ching. I find this kind of thing very, very interesting. As an example, the day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, I rushed to the computer to check the resonance. Resonance, birth of Muhammad. Same. Couldn't differentiate. So clearly, and so what happened in both cases is that people in a certain part of the world made an enormous surge forward into self-expression, if you want. And the whole Gulf War crisis paralleled the life of Muhammad, and when Muhammad died, the war was over. It was born at the resonance of his birth, and it was completed at the resonance of his death. I find this kind of thing very suggestive and quite uncanny. We are living through, in a 67-year period that stretches from 1945 to 2012, a compressed version of a larger historical epoch, 4,306 years long, that also ends in 2012. So that we have reached, by this reckoning, the late 700s right now. This is what we are living through. And ahead of us lies the Gothic Renaissance, the European Enlightenment, the discovery of the Newtonian mechanics, the discovery of the New World. That all lies ahead of us. It all has to be compressed into the next 22 years of time. And that is what accounts for the crazy quality of modernity. It's what accounts for fads and fashions. You know, hemlines are rising and falling in a rhythm based on the rise and fall of empires millennia ago. And these things are as causally linked as the orbit of the Earth is linked to the sun, you see. Because we are being drawn toward the attractor through shorter and shorter epochs. And not only must the entire last 4,000 years of history be compressed into this 67-year period from 1945 to 2012, but there is a 384-day period preceding December 22nd, 2012, when the last 67 years and the last 4,300 years have to be compressed into that. Then there's a final 6-day period when all of these things are compressed again. And so do you see what's happening? The spiral is tightening as it goes faster and faster. The resonances are impinging. The thing is getting nuttier and nuttier and nuttier as computers link all cultures together, all informational barriers dissolve. Everything is becoming connected to everything else. Not only everything in the present moment, but all past moments as well are being drawn, compressed, squeezed toward the production of the transcendental object at the end of time, which is nothing less than all time, all space, shrunk down to an atomic dimension and handed back to us. Do you see? The way Joyce constructed Ulysses was he had a character who was walking around Dublin in a fog trying to buy some kidneys to fry for breakfast, and Joyce made of his peregrination from one seedy bar to butcher shop and back, bordello, he overlaid it over the geography of the Mediterranean and the chronology of the Homeric wars, the Trojan Wars, and produced a novel which was in resonance with a much larger historical period. I believe this is how reality really works. I mean, I have a saying, Rome falls 9 times an hour. And it's your job to be sensitive to this. You can feel it when it falls. You can feel the rise of Chaldea, the spread of the Slavic peoples, the burning of Çatalhöyük, while you're vacuuming your apartment.
Or having sex.
Or having sex. All that stuff that's cycling. Those aren't your thoughts. Those are the thoughts of the Gaian matrix as these resonances mesh and reflect and work their way against each other. Nazi Germany down here, World War II fought across the bottom of this trough. After World War II, everybody was sick to death of novelty. They'd seen about all of it they could stand. Death camps, radar, V-2 rockets, propaganda, radio, massive displacement of populations, eugenics, 1,000-year genetic control myths, master race theory. Enough already. And after Germany was kicked to pieces, all people wanted to do was go home, have some kids, mow the lawn, put their feet up and watch the game. And they did that. And this is the post-war Reconstruction era where the stress is all about let's get back to normal. That was even a motto after 1945, return to normalcy and so forth. But then there are these little stumbles along the way called Sputnik, assassination of John F. Kennedy, so forth and so on. And then as you come across the top, right here, the great turning point, 1967-68, you've got it all. You've got LSD, you've got a youth revolution, you have technology reaching for the moon, literally, and the moon landing is right there. So, and then it all, and that whole, the 60s obviously blew the lid off of things and started a descent into novelty in which we are still experiencing and reeling from. It's a direct resonance to Homeric Greece. And the hippies did have a Grecian quality. I mean, all those barefoot people in robes practicing their vegetarianism and playing their flutes and gathering in green spots. Now notice that I have not reconfigured the wave from the first time when I set it for 6 billion years. We've come through planetary dynamics, we've come through evolutionary dynamics, we've come through the dynamics of ancient civilization. We now only have 5 years and 7 months on the screen. And what have we got? Okay, I'll show you what we've got. First of all, George Bush is elected right here, which means that Ronald Reagan leaves office right here. This is the absolute resonance for the fall of the Roman Empire. And Ronald Reagan clearly is the carrier of that energy, the imperial style, the whole tone of the thing was Roman. Now we have to account for this. What is this low point? It's Tiananmen Square, on the money. And if you don't think that was a novel event, try to picture it. 2 million people crowd into the capital city of the largest governmental entity on the planet and bring it to a screeching halt until it finds a solution. mass murder, the most traditional solution to these kinds of problems, and then the wave turns up. There's nothing novel about murdering large numbers of people. That is the traditional response to many situations. Okay, Tiananmen Square is there. The next thing we have to account for is right there.
I believe that dangers await only those who do not react to life.
Berlin Wall comes down right there, on the money, on the day, right there. Okay. That little saddle there, the absolute resonance to the birth of Muhammad. It's the day Saddam Hussein invades Kuwait. This is the only original idea that I have ever come up with. The rest is just telling you what Schultes and Hoffman and everybody knows and what you could find out by spending time in a good medical library. This is original, and my notion of what the psychedelic experience is for is that we each must become like fishermen and go out onto the dark ocean of mind and let your nets down into that sea. And what you're after is not some behemoth that will tear through your nets, foul them, and drag you and your little boat, into the abyss, nor are what we're looking for a bunch of sardines that can slip through your net and disappear. Ideas like, have you ever noticed that your little finger exactly fits your nostril, and stuff like that. What we are looking for are middle-sized ideas that are not so small that they're trivial and not so large that they're incomprehensible, but middle-sized ideas that we can wrestle into our boat and take back to the folks on shore and have fish dinner. And every one of us, when we go into the psychedelic state, this is what we should be looking for. It's not for your elucidation. It's not part of your self-directed psychotherapy. You are an explorer, and you represent our species. And the greatest good you can do is to bring back a new idea, because our world is endangered by the absence of good ideas. Our world is in crisis because of the absence of consciousness. And so, to whatever degree any one of us can bring back a small piece of the picture and contribute it to the building of the new paradigm, then we participate in the redemption of the human spirit. And that, after all, is what it's really all about. That's it, folks. Thank you very much.